Well, buen camino there, pilgrims. I'm Jeremiah Gibbs. I'm your Camino guide. Just making a video for you from Camino today. I'm on Camino Frances. You know, we had a lot of conversation at dinner a couple nights ago about what is the hardest section or the hardest part of Camino Frances. Like, what's the hardest day on Camino Frances? And I'll give my vote, and I'll give my vote last, but I'll also tell you about two sort of notable runner-ups, if you will. Some folks would say that the climb up to O Cebreiro would be the most difficult day, and whether you climb O Cebreiro at the end of your day after walking the kind of long path through the sun, and there's a long path and a slight incline that leads up to O Cebreiro, and then if you climb O Cebreiro at the end of your day, then your legs will probably already be pretty tired. It may be hot, and that can be a pretty hard climb. If you climb O Cebreiro at the beginning of your day, the way that I do, then there's a lot of up and down after you reach Cebreiro. I usually stay in Fria after climbing Cebreiro, and so there's a lot of up and down climbing even after you get to Cebreiro. That's a pretty challenging, difficult day. I think there are other folks who would say that the day into Molinaseca is the hardest. So once you climb up to Cruz de Ferro, and some people will even climb the last part of that's pretty steep up, the morning of, and then climbing down from Cruz de Ferro into Molinaseca is a very extreme downhill. It's probably the most extreme downhill on Camino Frances, and it can be a very challenging walk, especially for your knees, your ankles, your joints. I think I've had about 150 pilgrims that I've led on Camino over the years, and I've definitely had the most injuries on the walk into Molinaseca. So that's definitely a good contender for a hardest day. My vote, though, for the hardest day on Camino de Santiago, Frances at least, is going to be that first day. And whether you break it up by walking from St. Jean up to Orison in day 1, and then walking from Orison to Roncesvalles for day 2, or if you try to do it the way most people do and walk all the way from St. Jean to Roncesvalles, I think it's definitely the hardest day. Not only is there a long incline, especially if you climb up from Orison that morning of, it's very steep from St. John to Orison, and then you have a long climb for a couple hours even up the Pyrenees, up the peak where the border is. And then what maybe even makes that day harder is that you do have a pretty severe downhill for about 4 kilometers downhill after you reach the peak of that mountain. So that day, even if you don't break it up, is still, I would say, the hardest day on Camino Frances. But if you do break it up, it's still the hardest. But if you don't break it up, it's definitely the hardest day on Camino Frances. So that's one of the reasons that I always suggest to people to stay in Orison or Borda on the way up. Those two albergues are lovely, and they have a great tradition of helping pilgrims get to know each other at the meals there. So I would highly recommend that you stay at one of those places on Camino. If this video is helpful for you, I hope that you'll check out my video about how to train for Camino de Santiago. You can click here and find out my recommendations for training.